Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
It's the fantasygreek.com. The NFL starts and fantasy football starts and sits in 60 minutes. It's the Week 10 edition. It's getting down to crunch time, kids. Most of us have 4 weeks left counting this week in our regular seasons before the playoff starts. It's time to start solidifying your playoff position. And Jim Sarantias from the fantasygreek.com and myself are here to take you through all of the NFL matchups. Jim, happy Wednesday.
Hey, Keith, happy Wednesday to you. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. I'm getting rid of this hacking cough little by little. That's been like, people have been convinced I've had like the plague, like the bubonic plague is like making a comeback because I've been hacking left and right everywhere.
Is the bubonic plague really making a comeback?
It feels like it in my chest the last 12 days. It's been bad. It's been awful. But how have you been?
You know, I'm doing well. I guess I could complain, but I'm not going to because the Cubs are World Series champions.
Yeah, so we'll do this show all in one shot this year or this week. So we won't have any distractions from the World Series. We won't have my health canceling the show like it did 2 weeks ago. We are back to 100% right here this week. So if you're new to the program, the way that this works is that Jim and I will go through each NFL matchup and tell you who you should be focusing on for your fantasy football lineups and who you should be sitting. And if at any time you have lineup questions and concerns of your own, the phone number to call in is 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. And or you can hit us up on Twitter with the hashtag AskTFG. That's AskTFG. And we'll get to your issues at the appropriate time. So, Jim?
Sure.
Was there anything last week that stood out to you? That kind of drove you nuts?
You know, you always ask me this damn question, and I'm always a little kind of like, I don't know.
I think the Vikings' defense has been exposed.
I don't know if it's their defense. I think it's their offense that's been exposed. They had no running game last week to speak of.
Right.
And what the hell happened to Kyle Rudolph? He had the easiest matchup amongst all tight ends, and all they could do is throw the ball to him 3 times. And the only time, thank God, if you played him last week, it counted was a 1-yard pass for a TD. That was absolutely nuts. I could not believe that.
Right.
I guess another thing, the Eagles' defense is sort of faltering. It hasn't been so good in fantasy like it was to get the season started. So I suppose that's a little bit disconcerting. This week, they're definitely a sit-'em going up against the Falcons' offense that nobody's really had an answer for.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. Dak Prescott, how about him?
Yep. He's in my opinion, he's cemented his spot as a starter. There's no way that they go to Tony Romo unless they start losing games, in my opinion.
And you know, it's really funny. I was looking at him as a fantasy, and we can talk about this a little bit more as a fantasy football starter. And they don't have the easiest of schedules coming up, but man, the way he has played, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He has not looked like a rookie to say the least. But they're winning games. You know, that's the most important thing. He's not turning the ball over, and they're winning games. So why do you mess with success at this point?
Yeah. I mean, seriously, because you know, our power rankings, it's all about the New England Patriots. You know, they're the number 1 team as best as anybody can see. I don't know how you beat Tom Brady, and you know they've got the record to show with 2 different quarterbacks, and they've had their own injuries, and knocking on the doors those Dallas Cowboys and a couple other teams. So Atlanta Falcons and those Oakland Raiders. How about those guys?
Yeah, and the flip side of that is Denver's offense is just adrift. Like they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, I didn't spend as much time focusing on the Broncos, but I was stunned. Devonta Booker did not have a good game last week. He better have one this week, or else Capri Bibbs is going to become a real popular name.
Yep. And also, how about Indianapolis going into Green Bay?
Yeah, that was pretty. There's a team that, if you recall, at the beginning of the preseason, I was talking about them, that I was interested to see how the regular season would go out, because I thought that there's a potential issue going on with the team and with the coaches, and Mike McCarthy sort of behind it. I mean, our own Jim Weidner, who covers the Green Bay Packers for the FantasyGreek.com, does a nice job talking about these things. And the short of it is the passing offense of the Packers. We've seen the one that really works from a couple seasons ago only recently, and then Mike McCarthy seemed to go away from it, and I just don't know what the guy is thinking. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it works for you, keep doing it.
Suddenly, he's on the hot seat. I think.
Oh, he's on the hot seat, my friend.
Because that's a talented roster there.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
All right,
very much so.
And of news before we get into the games, excuse me, our weekly pick'em game, our season-long pick'em contest is now a 2-point lead for Jim, 68-66. I will look to close that gap this week as we are running out of time here. So, without further ado, let's jump into the Thursday night game, the Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, you are forced to sit through another Cleveland Browns exhibition as they go to Baltimore in a division game. If this was in Cleveland, I'd actually be a little bit more interested in this because I think that they play better. The division games are better matchups when the lesser team is at home. But Baltimore being at home, coming off a big win against the Steelers last week where they shut down the Steelers' offense. Cleveland's offense should pose no issue to them. And also the Browns' defense is suspect on a good day. I'm taking the Ravens at home here.
Yeah, everything about this game, and you always look at that second game and you ask yourself, is this going to be a better defensive game or a better offensive game? But the last time these two teams played each other was 2 months ago, back in week 2, and I think they're both different teams. They're not exactly the same. They're not going to do sort of the same things. And, this is one of the worst defenses in the league in the Cleveland Browns, and they're still rolling out a rookie going up against Ravens defense that suddenly is healthy. It was already good defending the rush. And even though they went up against one of the best passing offenses last week, they shut them down. So, I mean, this should all be Ravens, 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 Ravens. So Terrence West was a bust last week. I think you got to play him again as an RB2 because this matchup is so good. It's top 5 in the league in terms of the fantasy matchup. You want to start Steve Smith as long as he's healthy as a wide receiver 3 or flex play. Mike Wallace is a wide receiver 3. We saw his breakout potential last week. Dennis Pitta is a must-start TE1. When he played this team back in week 2, he had over 100 yards receiving, and I forget what they gave up last week to Jason. Oh, Jason Witten had a score and over 100 yards, and we haven't heard from that guy all season. And then Joe Flacco, if you need a streamer in a deeper league, I think he's a good start. The only hesitation why I wouldn't say, for sure, start him in a 10 or 12-team league is because Joe's had these great matchups, and he's floundered before. I don't think he will, but I'm not going to tell you to risk it if you have a better option. On the Brown side, Terrell Pryor's been good. I mean, he's gotten scores. He's put up decent amount of yards, but I'd look at him as a sort of I'll call him a low-end wide receiver 3, but he's sittable. If you have somebody better, Corey Coleman had a great game against these guys back then, but I don't think it was Cody Kessler that was throwing him the football. I think it was Robert Griffin III. So that's sort of, again, a wide receiver 3 flex play. Gary Barnidge, I think you can sit him this week. And Isaiah Crowell did have 100 yards rushing last time out. But again, this is one of the top rush defenses in the league, and I think he's sort of a sit him unless you have no other choices. But I'll take the Ravens at home as well.
Kansas City Chiefs travel to the Carolina Panthers. This is an interesting matchup. Alex Smith and Spencer Ware both full participants in practice today, so that bodes well for their return to action this weekend. But the offenses are pretty similar and comparable as when you stack them up as far as rush yards, passing yards, points per game. On defense, though, that's where the Panthers are a little bit better, and they're a little bit better against the run. Actually, they're a lot better against the run. They're about 50 yards per game better than the Chiefs. And even though the Panthers give up points, I think being able to stop the run and making Alex Smith have to throw the ball to be successful will ultimately not bode well for the Chiefs on the road. I'm taking the Panthers at home.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Panthers at home too. The Chiefs, they get into these games like they did last week with the Jaguars that they should really just be defensively dominant, and they don't do it. And there's too much about this Panthers team to like. They played a much tougher defense, I think, against the Los Angeles Rams last week. They can be successful against the Chiefs. They're at home. So you can still keep playing a Cam Newton. You can still keep playing a Jonathan Stewart. Kelvin Benjamin is still Greg Olsen is obviously a must play. I'd even play the Panthers defense this week, even though they might be number 6, not number 2 in the rankings. On the flip side, for the Chiefs, Spencer Ware's the main guy. That's their offense is going to run through him, so I like him. He's been dominant in every single game he's played in. Travis Kelce is a must-start against a Panthers team that's, I think, giving up the second most fantasy points to the position. Alex Smith, despite the matchup, I never really like him on a week-to-week basis because, again, he's a quarterback that he gets a great matchup and he does nothing for you because they hand off the football the entire game and he throws 1 TD and 200 yards. That's just not going to cut it these days. And with Jeremy Maclin missing this week, at least that's what it's looking like. Tyreek Hill or Chris Conley are going to be low-end options or like a wide receiver 3 flex play in deeper leagues. I wouldn't play them in a 10 or 12-team league. You could easily find something better on your waiver wire. But like you, Keith, I'm going to take the Panthers at home.
All right, the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are kind of an enigma. I mean, they've lost, losing a tight game last week at Kansas City, 19-14. Starting to wonder just how much time Gus Bradley really has. I know he fired his offensive coordinator, but sooner or later it's got to lead back up to him. How these teams match up by the numbers. The Jaguars are a better passing team. The Texans are a better running team. As far as third down conversions on offense, the Texans are about 7 points better. The part that concerns me about trying to figure out who's going to determine an outcome in this game is that looking at the defenses, the Texans' passing defense is only giving up about 190 passing yards per game. And the Jaguars have to be able to pass the ball. They're only running the ball for about 89 yards a game. So if they can't pass, it's going to be stifling. And the fact that the Jaguars' defense is allowing opposing offenses to convert 42% of their third downs, I'm going to pick Houston on the road here.
Yeah, I am too, and really a big reason for me is the fact that they're coming out of their bye, so they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. The interesting thing about the Texans is that despite having lost their best defensive player in J.J. Watt, their defense is still, maybe not from a fantasy football perspective, but from the perspective of football, they're still a good defense, and they're still doing what it takes to slow down the other team, even though their offense has struggled. So I like the Texans on the road for that very reason. For the Texans, Lamar Miller is a TFG stardom this week. The Jacksonville Jaguars, that's a position that they're weak defending, so I like him this week. I like DeAndre Hopkins. It's just another week off that he got to work with Brock Osweiler and hope to God that they start connecting because he's still highly targeted. Sooner or later, he's going to bust out a big play, and why not this week? I like C.J. Fedorowicz, who in the last, actually a little over a month, has put up solid numbers. He's doing well in part because Will Fuller is struggling, as well as the fact that Will Fuller had been hurt, and so has Jalen Strong. You keep starting him as a TE1 without hesitation unless you have a better matchup, maybe a Dennis Pitta. But outside of that, it's very hard. Or, Greg Olsen, the usual guys, you start those guys ahead of him. But I think C.J. Fedorowicz is solidifying himself as a weekly must-start. Will Fuller is supposed to be back this week. How effective he's going to be is unclear. He's been struggling, so I don't see too many people starting him, except maybe in deeper leagues as a flex play. The Texans are an option this week as a defense. On the other side, I don't like Blake Bortles this week. I think he is a bench him. I think Allen Robinson is a bench him. This is a Texans defense that, regardless of their injuries, you look at the stats and the numbers, and other teams are struggling against them. So they're still playing up at a high level. Chris Ivory is an interesting play, and in part it's because last week he had more than double-digit carries. I think he broke for 100 yards. I can't recall if he scored, but that doesn't matter. When you're getting those kinds of touches and putting up that kind of yardage, that's a good play. And the Texans, that's the position that they have a difficult time defending. I'd consider him as an RB3. And if you're really desperate as an RB2, if you're on one of these injury-riddled teams that I've seen so many of in so many different fantasy leagues, and then Julius Thomas, why don't you go ahead and bench him? This is it's another position that the Texans defend well. Keith, Texans on the road.
The Denver Broncos travel to the New Orleans Saints, and the Broncos are kind of at a crossroads because they just went to Oakland in primetime game last week and lost 30-20. You know, you could say what you want about Denver's offense, that 20 points is pretty much what we can expect out of that offense. But giving up 30 to Oakland, I know they've got Derek Carr and all, but the Denver defense is supposed to be legit. And now they're traveling to New Orleans, they like playing at home. They like playing on the turf. They just went to San Francisco and put up 41 points. They put up 25 points at home against Seattle's defense. What are they going to do against this? I'm not liking the way that the Broncos are trending right now, and I'm going to take the Saints at home.
I'm going to take the Saints as well, and I think the big problem with the Broncos defense is, I mean, they've just got some injuries. Aqib Talib, it was thought that, and I even mentioned it to you, Keith, last week, that if Talib wasn't playing, that the matchup for the Raiders wide receivers became better. And I still think that that's the case in this particular instance. So for me, it's very difficult to find a reason to not pick the Saints in this game. Because of all these injuries, Drew Brees is still playable against this defense. He's Drew Brees. He's a top 5 play. I like what Mark Ingram and Tim Hightower did last week, and I think we should see something similar this week. And that's the Broncos' main weakness is defending the rush. So go ahead and get those guys on the fantasy gridirons, either as RB2s or flex plays. They should be solid this week. You can go ahead and start Brandon Cooks. Michael Thomas is starting to become matchup proof. So I don't see any reason why you can't start him at least as a wide receiver 3, certainly as a flex play. And then Willie Snead, he's actually a guy I would consider benching. He hasn't really done much since week 2 of the season. And, you know, there's just so many better options right now. Until Willie gets his feet back underneath him, I might avoid that. For the Broncos, Devonta Booker gets, as I mentioned earlier, a great matchup. He is still a player that should be started in fantasy leagues. If he was one of these guys that was you picked him up for the bye week and now he's really your third running back, see if you can't flex him, because it should be another good week. Trevor Siemian is not. This is a good matchup. I mean, he's going to be forced to throw the football. We saw what Colin Kaepernick did last week, over 300 yards passing and a couple of TDs, one I think by the air, one on the ground. But yeah, I don't trust him. I just don't trust him in general from fantasy when there's so many other better players. But if you do need to stream him, he is an option. Go ahead and get yourself going with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders as wide receiver 2s. They both could do some damage this week with Demaryius Thomas, the better of the two. And in a sleeper at tight end, Virgil Green, the Saints just really don't cover the position, so he could have a great game, but he would have to be a player that you're considering because you're really in a pinch. Otherwise, there's a lot of guys that are a little bit more certain that you could start ahead of him. Saints at home.
All right. The LA Rams travel to. Sorry, I needed a second there. The LA Rams travel to the New York Jets. Oh, by the way, the Denver Broncos injury report. Chris Harris did not practice today. Russell Okung did not practice today. Let's see. Aqib Talib did not practice today. TJ Ward did not practice today. And Derek Wolfe also did not practice today. So it is going to be slim pickings for the defense there. All right, the Rams travel to the Jets. The Rams coming off the bye, losing to Carolina 13-10 last week. And the Jets losing at Miami 27-23. Ryan Fitztragic making an appearance in that game as well. Looking at how these teams match up, gosh, it's just a pile of mediocrity on the field in this game. So what are we left with? The Jets are allowing 81 yards per game on the ground. That's okay because the Rams don't really rush the ball that well, only 77 yards. With Todd Gurley, the Rams are only rushing the ball for 77 yards per game. They're only scoring 16 points per game. The Jets' defense has allowed some points, 26.1, but I just don't like this. I don't feel comfortable saying that the LA Rams are going into New Jersey to beat the Jets on the road. I can't do it. I'm picking the home team, Jets.
Jets, baby. Look, bottom line is the Rams have the lowest scoring offense in the league, and even a team like the Jets that can't seem to get out of its own way is certainly talented enough to be able to do some damage and put some points up on the scoreboard, even in a tight pinch like this. If you're looking at this game from a fantasy perspective on the Rams side, Todd Gurley, borderline RB1, really an RB2 these days. He's just not doing it for people, but I just can't trade him because you're never going to get what the guy is worth, and we know he's worth a lot more than what he's been doing on this team. Kenny Britt, you can play him this week as a wide receiver 3. He's just a decent enough player that can get 100 yards or 10 points. I know Brian Quick last week flashed and put some points on the board, but he's been inconsistent, and obviously Tavon Austin is inconsistent, but I wouldn't discard them as there's sleepers, deep sleepers, so you could look to them in a deeper league, but in standard-sized leagues, I'd avoid them. For the Jets, Fitzpatrick, I don't know how you can trust him at this point of the season, regardless of what the matchup says. Matt Forte remains a must-start either as an RB2 or as an RB1. You got to keep rolling with Brandon Marshall, who doesn't have a bad matchup here. It's more middle of the road, but because he's one of Fitzpatrick's favorite players, he's going to get his opportunities. Hopefully this week he gets back into the end zone because his fantasy team owners really need him to come through for them at some point here if they're going to make the playoffs. And lastly, if you need a defense, and they're still widely available, go get yourself some New York Jets and get them fired up against the league's worst scoring offense. New York Jets win this one at home.
All right. The Atlanta Falcons travel to the Philadelphia Eagles. This would be an interesting matchup because the Eagles' defense at one time looked pretty lights out. They have not recently. But the Falcons' offense has just continued to click along to the points of 429.2 yards per game, also scoring 33.9 yards per game. The Eagles' defense still only allowing 18.1 yards per game on average. However, you look at they lost to the Giants. They gave up 28 points in a loss to the Giants last week. The week before, they gave up 29 to the Cowboys. Both of those offenses good, not great. I don't like the way that Atlanta's offense is lining up here. I'm going to pick the Falcons on the road.
This is a tough game to call because I think there's some opportunity for the Philadelphia Eagles defense to bounce back. They're playing at home, so that's something that does go in their favor. Carson Wentz, people are going to look at him and say, oh, he's a rookie. He's been so bad. Well, if you've looked at his schedule for the past month, yeah, he's played some really tough teams with some really tough defenses. Where on the other hand, this is a Falcons defense giving up roughly around 300 passing yards per game, 2 to 3 TDs per game. I see Carson Wentz thriving here. I'm going to take the Eagles at home. I like Carson Wentz as a streaming option. If you need the help in a deeper league, go ahead and pick him up and play him. Jordan Matthews, he is a must start this week in a very favorable matchup. Zach Ertz can be started this week in a favorable matchup. Darren Sproles can be started this week in a favorable matchup. Ryan Matthews will end up being sort of a flex play option. You're going to have to go with your gut a little bit on this one because, we don't really know how he's going to be used or if he's going to get that opportunity, but certainly if he does, it will be there. And on the flip side, you start your Falcons. You start Matt Ryan, you start Julio Jones, you start Devonta Freeman. If Tevin Coleman is active, you can start him as a flex play. Austin Hooper, I do like, is a streaming option. It's not the greatest matchup for him because the Eagles have actually been pretty good defending the position, but he's still their best red zone threat from that position, so why not give him a go if you have to? Otherwise, this should be a above-average scoring game. There's only probably 1 or 2 games that could score any higher. So you fire up your guys and you let it rip. Keith, I'm going to take the Eagles at home in an upset.
All right, the Chicago Bears travel to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bears coming off a bye. We get to see whether that game in Minnesota on Halloween 2 Monday nights ago was the real deal or not. The Bears sitting at 2-6. The NFC North is suddenly up for grabs, and while they're a long shot away, if they can string some wins together, they could definitely make some noise in that division. The Buccaneers got on a 2-game losing streak, losing to the Falcons last week 43-28, and they lost to the Raiders the week before 30-24. And now they travel to Chicago. The offense is by the numbers. the Buccaneers actually have scored a little bit more, although we all know the Bears have been awash in offensive struggles this season until that game against Minnesota, really, where they didn't really light it up, but Minnesota's defense is no joke. To put 20 points up against that defense is not nothing, but it's also one game. We just don't know what we can expect out of this team. Looking at the defense, but Tampa Bay has allowed 29 points per game. The Bears have been a little bit more stout, and they've also been playing better, a little bit better each week on defense. I'm going to take the Bears at home in this.
You know, Keith, I love that pick. I'm actually going to pick them as well because I like you, I'm seeing something in this team as of late, especially on their defense. Their defense has been pretty stout. They've been just pressuring quarterbacks and bringing on the boom, if you want to call it that, even Aaron Rodgers. So, look, you're the Bears. You're playing against a defense that's giving up a bunch of points, a bunch of fantasy points, regular points, whatever. Jay Cutler is a streaming option this week if you need him, certainly in a 2-quarterback league. I love him. Jordan Howard, if the game you saw him put up over 200 all-purpose yards in a score 2 weeks ago against a tough Minnesota defense doesn't make you believe he's a must-start this week, we'll start him against a defense that I think they're giving up the most fantasy points to the position. Not the most, they're certainly top 10. It's a great matchup for him. Alshon Jeffrey is a must-start. He should be a great start for you. I like Cameron Meredith as a sleeper. People have forgotten about him. I think the one drawback here is the emergence of Zach Miller, who's a low-end start as a TE1, as well as Eddie Royal may be returning. But that still doesn't mean he can't be a deep sleeper in the sense that there's a genuine opportunity here for the Bears to put some points up on the board. On the Tampa Bay side, Jameis Winston, I think this could be a tough game for him. Mike Evans could be a tough game for him. I wouldn't bench Mike Evans because he's just so highly targeted. He could do some damage by putting up 100 yards in a score. But Jameis Winston, I might shy away from if I have a better player that I could start ahead of him. Cameron Brate is a streaming option, but he is touchdown dependent. If he doesn't get a TD, it's 30 or 40 yards, and that's it. And that's it, and I might just avoid him. But other than that, Keith, wow, we're both taking the Bears on the road. This will be interesting.
All right, how times can change in the NFL
and very quickly.
Week 3, I was ready to plant the headstone.
I'm still ready to, but that's okay.
That's part of our what's the word I'm looking for? We're a stray dog that's been beat before. Every time somebody raises their hand to us, we just run away. That's what the state of being a Bears fan is. As soon as things start to get awry, we just when's the draft? The Green Bay Packers travel to the Tennessee Titans. Packers, not exactly what we thought they'd be. Losing to the Colts at home last week, 31-26. They went to Atlanta and lost a heartbreaker by 1 point on the road against a good Falcons team. But now they travel to Tennessee, a team that has made strides this season. You know, Marcus Mariota, the quarterback for Tennessee, hasn't been all that bad. He's been actually showing signs of being a franchise quarterback. Looking at the numbers, how they match up, they both score about 24 points per game, both converting between 47 and 49% of their third downs. On defense, the Packers have just been really stout against the run, only 75 yards per game. And both these defenses are similar as far as how many points they give up. So, gosh, I just have a hard time thinking the Packers are going to lose this game. My gut tells me the Titans, but my head says to take the Packers. I'm going to take the Packers on the road here.
Okay, so let's see. Where are we on this?
This is a tough game.
Yeah, it is a tough game. I'm going to take the Packers too.
They've shown me nothing, Jim. They've shown me nothing this season.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take the Titans, and here's why. Ugh. The Packers defense is just decimated with injuries. Clay Matthews is either going to miss this game or banged up. They're missing a bunch of the guys in their secondary. We're seeing Marcus Mariota. He's a player who in the past month or so, he's basically throwing for on a low end 2 TDs or up to 4 TDs. Generally every week it's 3. And if it's not throwing for 3, then it's throwing for 2 and scoring 1 on the ground. He's throwing for roughly 300 yards almost every single game. DeMarco Murray is just unstoppable at running back. He has yet to hit a defense and not be a relevant contributor to their offense. So I'm finding it hard to look at Green Bay, who's been struggling, to see them do well. I mean, last week their offense looked like it was built around their tight end, and their tight ends. It's not that I dislike Richard Rodgers, but they're so talented in so many of their positions that they ignored him. So if that's the way Mike McCarthy is going to run that team, it's not a winnable formula for the Green Bay Packers. That having been said, in fantasy, you're going to keep starting Aaron Rodgers because it's a great matchup for him. Ty Montgomery makes for, if he's a running back in your league, then he's a good solid start as an RB2. If he's a wide receiver, then he's a wide receiver 3 or a flex play. Jordy Nelson, you start him. Randall Cobb, if active, who's hurt, you start him. Certainly Devontae Adams, you start. He's been one of the better players for them for the past month. And, you give it a go. This is another game that's going to be above average scoring, and there should be some fantasy points to be had. But I'm going to take the Titans at home in this one in a big upset.
All right. The Minnesota Vikings travel to the Washington Redskins. The Vikings, who after week 6 were everybody's darlings to go to the Super Bowl, and now on a 3-game losing streak, they lost at Philadelphia, at Chicago, and then last week at home they lost to Detroit. In a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking loss with Golden Tate just catching a ball and scoring on a play he never should have been allowed to score at. Wrap up the tackle, kids. Wrap up the tackle. That's all I'm going to say. And now they travel to Washington, a team that puts up 410 yards of offense, almost 300 through the air, another $111 on the ground, scoring just a little over 23 points per game, converting 44% of their third downs. Yeah, but the Vikings' offense isn't comparable, but that's because it's not their strength. What you want to talk about here is the Vikings' defense. It's all world. It really is. They're only giving up 15.8 points per game. They're only giving up 93 yards on the ground, just 205 through the air. Something's got to give here, kids. And the part that scares me the most is that the Redskins' defense is allowing almost 46% of opponents' third down conversions. Minnesota's offense needs a defense like that they can get them off the hook. But I'm not going to pick against the Redskins at home. I'm not going to do it. I think the Vikings are they're going through something right now, and I don't think this is the game that they get it right in. I'm going to pick the Redskins at home.
I am too, Keith. In a big reason why I'm going to pick them is, one, they're playing at home, and 2, they're coming out of their bye week. So, like many other teams, they're going to have an opportunity. They've had an opportunity to prepare for this game for 2 weeks, and I think that bodes well against a Minnesota Vikings team, which you've described as adrift, and it's mostly adrift on offense, and so it's very difficult to view their offensive players and confidently say, "Oh, start this guy." No, sit this guy. So, for example, Stephon Diggs, I think it's difficult to sit him. I think you're always going to view him as a wide receiver 3 or a flex play and get him going. Kyle Rudolph is a TE1, but after what we saw last week, he's more of a lower TE1, and there's players you could play ahead of him. So I would consider those better. If you had Tyler Eifert, I would definitely start him ahead of Kyle Rudolph, no questions asked. Dennis Pitt, I would start ahead of him. CJ Fedora, I would start ahead of him. You can come to thefantasygreek.com and see those rankings. Jerick McKinnon would be a great start this week against a weaker Redskins rush defense. But yet, last week, it was a 3-headed monster in terms of running back committee, so it's hard to view him as a player that is a must-start, and he's probably more of a must-bench. Swing over to the Redskins, it's not a good matchup for them offensively, for their playmakers. So Kirk Cousins suddenly becomes a shaky play. Deshaun Jackson, I think, is a must-sit. Jamison Crowder is a shaky play if Deshaun Jackson is active. Jordan Reed, you start him every week because he's a tight end that has a lot of upside and can explode at any given time, and he's targeted enough in the offense that he should be productive for you. Rob Kelly should be getting the start again. If he can do what Jordan Howard did last week, I mean, it'd be phenomenal. I just don't know that he's that same kind of running back. If he gets his 80 yards in a TD, I think that'd be great. So you can view him as a low-end RB2, but probably better yet as a flex play. But I'm gonna take the Redskins at home because I think their defense is playable this week, just like the Vikings, and it'll be a pretty good battle. I wouldn't necessarily call it low scoring, but it's more average scoring. So maybe combined we see 30 points altogether.
Yeah, I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
So,
but I'll take the Redskins.
All right, Miami Dolphins at the San Diego Chargers. The Dolphins, kids, coming off their bye, beating the Jets at home 27-23. The Chargers winning against Tennessee Titans last week, coming off that loss on the road to Denver, 43-35. The Chargers seem like a team that want to figure it out. They're always one step away from doing something, but they never seem to be able to put it all together. The Dolphins, on the other hand, everybody just keeps waiting for Ryan Tannehill to make that next step. And last week, I saw him make some throws that I thought were real NFL quarterback type throws. The thing here is that the San Diego rush defense has been lights out, 85 yards on the ground per game. They do give up some points, but if this has to come down to one offense over the other, I will take San Diego's offense over Miami's. I'm going to take the Chargers at home.
The only thing I like about this game for the Dolphins is they have J.J. And even last week against a really good Jets rush defense, I mean, he didn't put up at 200 yards, but he had a good game. He was fantasy relevant. If you played him, he probably helped you win your fantasy football game. So they've got a chance. If they can keep the ball out of Phillip Rivers' hands, that's how they will win this game. But until they do that, I'm taking the Chargers at home too. Their defense, well, I question them because 2 of their last 3 games were against the Broncos, which are an offensively challenged team compared to other teams. The reality is last week they were lights out. They had 1 or 2 more defensive TDs, so they're opportunistic. They're doing all the right things. And I question Ryan Tannehill in terms of his decision making. He's not doing what he should be doing given the number of years experience he has in this offense and in the NFL. We'll take the Chargers at home. I'm calling Phillip Rivers a must-start this week. There's only a few quarterbacks I would play ahead of him. Melvin Gordon is a must-start every single week. Terrell Williams, get him in as a wide receiver too, or if you have 2 really good top wide receivers, and get him in as a flex or a 3. With Travis Benjamin banged up, he should be the guy to benefit from this. So I'd like to see him at 60, 80 yards and a score. Dontrell Williams is more of a deep sleeper, given Antonio Gates, who can be started. I mean, Gates, I think now is coming back from an injury and is so back into the offense that he's fantasy relevant. So he's more of a mid-range to a low-end TE1. Justin Hunter, until it's become a regular deal, you don't have to start him, but certainly he's at the lower end of the starting tight ends in terms of fantasy football. For Miami, start J.J. How do you not start Jarvis Landry? He's probably your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, so you go ahead and you give him a go. Outside of that, is it going to be Kenny Stills? Is it going to be Devontae Parker? I don't know. So I'd probably stay away from those guys. San Diego Chargers at home.
The San Francisco 49ers travel to the Arizona Cardinals. No need to read into this. The Cardinals should win this hands down. San Francisco's defense is just deplorable. I, in my league, was able to pick up J.J. Nelson. I'm feeling very good about it this weekend. I'm picking the Cardinals.
Yeah, this should be a one-sided blowout affair. There is just absolutely nobody on the 49ers worth a start. Even DeJuan Harris, who last week blew it up for what was maybe 80, 100 all-purpose yards and a score, just against the Cardinals, that they're at the top of the defensive categories against pretty much all the positions. Don't start anybody on the 49ers, but start, by all means, start Carson Palmer, David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald. The Cardinals defense, you can get John Brown in as a wide receiver 3, J.J. Nelson as a wide receiver 3 flex play. This should be just a one-sided affair. Cardinals win at home.
All right, the Dallas Cowboys travel to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, if you asked me 3 weeks ago, this would be a game that I was licking my chops for. After watching the Steelers play the Ravens, I just don't know which Steelers team we're going to see. They put up 14 points, but one of those was on a mad Ben Roethlisberger scramble. Le'Veon Bell was very lackluster last week, and you look at how Dallas has played defense. They're only giving up 86.9 yards a game on the ground. Pittsburgh needs Le'Veon Bell to be untracked and tearing it up. They've only been running the ball for 96 yards per game on average. That's not going to get it done. The Cowboys, on the other hand, have rushed for 165.2. That's right. They've rushed for 165 yards per game this season. And Dak Prescott is thrown for 246 and change. Both teams are converting over 40% of their third downs. Cowboys scoring 27 points per game, Steelers 23. I don't like this matchup for the Steelers. I just don't. I think Dallas is playing too good, and in Pittsburgh, they're home, and I'm sure they're going to be charged up to play Dallas. But I'm riding the Cowboys right now. I'm going to take Dallas on the road.
Yeah, I'm not going against Dak Prescott either. I'm taking the Cowboys on the road for the reasons that you've stated. Dak Prescott, you keep playing him, even though the Pittsburgh Steelers have been pretty tough against the position. No one has slowed down Dak Prescott, even though he has played some pretty good defenses so far this season. Ezekiel Elliott remains a must-start. Des Bryant remains a must-start. I like Cole Beasley as a low-end wide receiver 3 flex play. He's still getting the work, and he was dropped by a lot of people, which made no sense to me. If you can get a guy who can get you 50 yards and the occasional score, which is what he's doing, you want that guy on your roster, and you want to play him in a bye week like this week. Jason Witten, what happened last week was kind of a fluke. Because of the way that Des Bryant was limited, Dak Prescott started throwing him the football. I just don't see that happening in back-to-back weeks, so I would avoid him. I probably wouldn't start the Dallas Cowboys. I wouldn't be scared of starting them if I had to, but Ben Roethlisberger is a guy that, again, he's a guy I wouldn't want to bet against either, even though I am just a little bit in this one in the sense that I think he's startable in fantasy football, but there's guys you can start ahead of him. Whether you want to call what happened last week because he had been rusty or out of shape or whatever you want to call it, he'll come back. And I like him as a QB1, just not a strong QB1. Keep starting Antonio Bright. Keep starting Le'Veon Bell. I like Jesse James this week. This is actually a pretty decent matchup for him fantasy-wise. He should be able to get you 50 to 60 yards, and I'm going to predict the score only because he's due. Sammy Coates, what can you say about the kid? We all know he's explosive, but if you're going to throw the ball 10 times to him and he drops half of them, unless one of the other 5 is for a score, he's going to hurt you. So consider that as you're setting up your roster. Pittsburgh Steelers defense is an option, but a low-end option against a great rookie quarterback. Cowboys on the road. It's unanimous, Keith.
The Seattle Seahawks traveled to the New England Patriots in what should be the game of the week. Here's the thing, man. Both these defenses are stingy. This game could be a 3-3 tie, which we all love, I'm sure. But that's how good these defenses are playing. That's how even these defenses are. The one thing that the Patriots have going for them is that they do run the ball for over 116 yards per game. I know the Patriots running that much just doesn't figure, but they somehow managed to do it. Tommy touchdown has been fantastic since he's come back. They're converting almost half of their third downs. They're at home. I'm picking the Patriots to win this game, but it'll be a 6-3 game.
Oh, really? See, I think that this. Well, I actually think that the Patriots are going to beat the Seahawks, not handily, but I see maybe the Seahawks putting up 20 points and Tom Brady putting up his usual 2 to 3 touchdowns. We'll see a rushing score, something like that. I'm more confident starting Tom Brady. LeGarrette Blount, I think, is a solid high-end RB2 because we know what they're going to do. They're going to run the football at the Seahawks, even though the Seahawks are one of the better rushing defenses. And defensively, they're going to do everything in their power to shut down Jimmy Graham. They're going to try and make Doug Baldwin beat him, which I don't know that can happen. Christine Michael, every week goes by, and his numbers keep getting smaller and smaller. CJ Prosise, as of today, Coach Carroll said he's going to I forget what his exact words were, but the word "a lot" was in there. Whether it's a lot of plays, a lot of action. CJ Prosise actually had more, was on the field more than Christine Michael. So if you need somebody and you're desperate, CJ Prosise is a guy to look at. And Russell Wilson, Russell Wilson's going to do what Russell Wilson does, which is when he's pushed into a corner, he'll fight back. So this could potentially be a good game for him in terms of, let's say, 250 yards and two scores. But that's how I view it over there. On the other side, Tom Brady must start. Garrett Blount can be started either as an RB2 or as a flex play. Julian Edelman is more of a wide receiver flex play. Tom Brady's using the whole field, not just Edelman, so I think that's hurting him a little bit. Rob Gronkowski's a must play, and I would actually avoid Martellus Bennett. He hasn't really been fantasy relevant in a few weeks, and there's nothing about this matchup that says, oh, start the tight ends. This is going to be crazy. He'll get into the end zone, which is what he'll need to be relevant. Otherwise, Keith, I'm taking the Patriots at home.
All right, in the Monday night game, the Cincinnati Bengals travel to the New York Giants. Gosh, this game. The Giants are up and down like a roller coaster. They beat Philadelphia coming off the bye last week, 28-23. The Bengals, they were on a bye last week, but the week before they were tying the Washington Redskins 27-27. So they're coming off a bye. They're fresh. They've had a full regiment of practices and then some to get ready for this game. Here's what I don't like about the matchup. Defensively, they're somewhat similar. The Bengals can get gashed on the ground slightly more than the Giants, but the Giants don't run the ball. They just don't. They're 68 yards a game on the ground. They're running, and I don't know how long it is till we see Paul Perkins in an expanded role because Rashad Jennings and company just has not been able to get the job done. Here's what the part of the matchup that I don't like for the Giants. The Bengals have been running for about 120 yards a game, and they have a decided amount of advantages time of possession. If they can run the ball and control the clock, and the Giants are not bad on defense, but they're still 94 a game is not stellar. It's not lights out material. If the Bengals run the ball and control the clock, they can win this game. I think that's what they do. I'm going to take the Bengals on the road.
Ooh, that's a big call.
It is.
I'm going to take the Giants at home, and I'm going to take them for one of the main reasons I've mentioned teams and why I've taken them is they're coming out of a bye week. And I think that's a very good reason when you have 2 weeks to prepare for a game to say, hey, there's no excuse here.
Oh, the Giants aren't coming out of a bye week.
Oh, they're not?
No, they beat Philly last week.
Oh, well, you know what? I'm just going to take them because they're at home. And it's a Cincinnati defense that has struggled. It has not been, the lights-out defense that we've seen the last few seasons. They've been playing up and down. The Giants have discovered Odell Beckham Jr., and hopefully they're going to discover Paul Perkins this week, but that remains to be seen. I like Eli Manning sort of as a lower QB1. Obviously, Odell Beckham Jr., I think he's a must-start. I don't even mind the Giants' defense as sort of a low-end streaming option in a 16-team league. For the Bengals, Andy Dalton has come alive now with Tyler Eifert back, and that bodes well, which is why I see where you're coming from. But I still like what we're seeing with Eli Manning as this season is now progressing. They're just opening up their offense. You can consider both of the Bengals running backs as low-end RB2s flex plays with probably Gio Bernard the slightly better favorite because of his role in the passing game. AJ Green is a weekly must-start despite the matchup. And I've already mentioned Tyler Eifert, and I think you have to start him from here on out because he'll be a guy doing exactly what he did 2 weeks ago, which is hauling in 9 receptions for 100-plus yards and a score every week. But I'll take the Giants at home, Keith.
All right. So let's check the Twitter feed really quick, and we are without any questions. So,
I had a couple of questions.
What's up?
No. I mean, I had some earlier.
Oh, what do you got?
And so I might as well share them. And one of them was interesting. It was whether to play Rashard Matthews or Randall Cobb this week.
Mm.
And I thought it was interesting because Rashard Matthews has sort of become a sexy pick up and play this past week because suddenly we're all noticing, hey, here's a player who has scored in 3 out of the last 4 games or 4 out of the last 5, whatever it is, and also thrown in 50 yards receiving here and there. And Randall Cobb has sort of been up and down. He's a little banged up, which is the concern this week. I don't even know if he plays, but I like Randall Cobb because the last few games when he's been healthy, the Packers have been going to him, specifically Aaron Rodgers, but they're also designing plays around him. And that's why I like him. I like him in that position as a player that potentially can get you 100 yards and a score compared to a player like Rashard Matthews, which is more of the 50 yards and a score. I still like him this week. I like him more as a wide receiver 3, though. So that's sort of how I would resolve that issue.
Because Randall Cobb with that hammy is just scary because the offense hasn't been the same.
It is, but Cobb he's had some productive games, and I picked the Titans at home. The way this is shaping up from a fantasy perspective, I think you can view this as productivity on the field. These are players that can do their thing.
Okay. I got my weekly running back question. Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, Devontae Booker. I need 2, and James White. Which 2 of those am I starting?
The first two.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I was going with.
Yeah, that's what I mean, I could see Devontae Booker is a player you want to start because of the favorable matchup, but certainly you don't sit Ezekiel Elliott. He's proven way too much, pretty much every single game to sit him. Le'Veon Bell, I'd have a hard time. There's no way.
He's just so dangerous, not just running but receiving as well.
Yes. By the way, I was looking at Randall Cobb's numbers real quick. He has scored a touchdown in 3 out of the last 4 games. In the one game that he did not score a touchdown, he had 108 yards. Followed that game up with 53 yards and a score, 95 yards and a score. Now, last week, 14 yards and a score, but 2 receptions. I can't recall if he hurt his hamstring within the game or if it was something that sort of came up afterwards, but that's what I would sort of check that off to. And if Cobb doesn't play, Rashard Matthews is a great fill-in.
All right, there you have it, folks. And with that, we are out of time. Well, we're really out of matchups to talk about, but we have for Jim Sarantios from thefantasygroup.com. I'm Keith Reed from 87 Sports Fans. And we'll be here every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to help you win your fantasy league and bring that trophy home. From here on out, the rest of the week, go to thefantasygroup.com for up-to-the-minute updates with as far as rankings and news. And may the odds be forever in your favor. Best of luck in your game.